Recording in progress.
You in without any issues. What's going on, my dear brother? What's going on? Peace and blessings.
Hey, how you doing, man?
I'm hanging in there, sir. How are you?
Cool. I had to jump in from Tampa, Florida, man, to send y'all some sunshine down there.
We appreciated all this rain and all this fog up here, you know.
Yeah, I feel you, man. I really appreciate what you're doing in Baltimore. I'm originally from Sandtown
That's what's
in
up.
Baltimore. So I really appreciate what you do because I'm in the same line of work. What I do is work with communities throughout the nation that are poor neighborhoods and teach them how to empower themselves. Because at the end of the day, when we let other people come in to do our show, they do our show and we on the other side of the table. We have to learn as a black people that there is value in poor people. So once poor people understand that value through mobilization and strategic planning, then we change the whole narrative. We did that in West Tampa and in Tampa, in which the community was pretty much controlled by others until the neighborhood came together, mobilized and organized itself. And it told developers, if you're coming here to do a project, you got to break something off to us. Because what you're doing here is causing gentrification. In order to resolve gentrification, we need to be intentional and we need to be purpose in terms of how we do it. And we do it with money. So our most recent project that's coming up is with the developer is that we're going to do what's known as the Technology, Wealth Building, and Job Creation Center. It's the first of its kind in the African American community. That's when we talk about how to reduce gentrification. Well, in our wealth building program, we plan to do what's known as a home-based e-commerce strategy in which poor people are learning how to start their own business. As a home-based business, you don't need bricks and mortar, which means it's cheaper to get started.
Correct.
So not only are we working with them in terms of that business plan, but we also are working with them in terms of getting the capital to start the plan. And we're letting the banks know that we are like we are because of you.
Correct.
And it's time that corporate America begins to get back. And I think that in Tampa, they took us for granted because you know how they take for granted for poor people? They didn't understand it. We was playing in the background. So while they was doubting us, we was playing in the background. And by the time we was ready to come out, it was too late because we'd already begun to do what we need to do. So to Baltimore, which is a heavy African American community, you have to understand the value is in you. Poor people are big business unless poor people learn how to be part of big business. So at the end of the day, that's so important for our poor neighborhoods to learn because those are in power, they're really afraid that if you understand that, these are the same people that didn't want to educate us. Why?
Right.
They understood what happened when we become educated.
That's right.
So, and we can do this in the South where racism with the governors all around us and show that we still can do this no matter what. The message is to all communities of color is that you always had the power. You know, and I think the person that your candidate, she understands that. She's going to what we call a bottom-up approach. Most time when we deal with community development, we deal with it from a top-down approach.
Correct. Right. That Ronald Reagan, that Reaganomics. Right. That Reaganomics. Exactly. That trickle-down economics. That's right.
We know what happened with the Reaganomics, right?
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
At the end of the day. See, it's all about building partnership between corporate America and the community and cutting out the middleman.
That's right.
These organizations has been around forever, always advocating for us. But guess what, John? Our community still look the same. So the definition of insanity is keep doing the same thing and expecting the same result. So it's refreshing that your candidate is going to get in the mix. And I know she's going to shake a lot of people up because they didn't see her coming. And that's the best way to do it. When you don't see you coming, and by the time they're ready to strategize and do something against you, it's too late. because you're in the mix already. So to the sister that's running, tell her that she's doing the right thing at the right time for the people. It's time that we have people that have the voice for the people and not the voice of the people with the money. And that's it's not only in Baltimore, but all over the place. They have sold us out. They devalue us. They told us to feed us. The poor people, we know it all. Yeah, with all that education you got, look where we are now.
Yeah, we're watching the documentary in reference to Florida, and during enslavement time, we were watching how they literally marched tens of thousands of enslaved people down into Florida in the top of the Panhandle. They brought them down there to colonize Florida after they beat the Spaniards and kicked the Spaniards out of Florida. And Tampa has a rich history. Tampa, Orlando, all of these cities have a huge, strong concentration of historically Black people in these communities. And one of the things that I know is that there have been some sins of the past that are causing what we see today in Tampa, Orlando, and many of these historical communities, where you have some of the same dynamics. You have a governor down there who's against critical race theory, which is really just about teaching about African studies, teaching about what happened, understanding the history, so that everybody has a clear understanding. Nobody argues with the Jewish community when we talk about the Holocaust and what happened with the Holocaust. They like to tell that story, but then when we tell our story in reference to the atrocities of enslavement and how we got to these regions, like Florida, Tampa, these areas, they don't want to allow us to tell our stories because they know telling our stories empowers us. And not only that, there's a saying that those who forget their history are condemned to repeat the history. And so, if you teach us our history, we're condemned to kind of fall into the same oppressive, white power, white supremacy, white control. We're due to fall into that oppression all over again because we don't understand where we came from out of oppression. And one of the things that's so critical about up here in Baltimore is we're looking at reparations and restorative justice, because we know that all the sins that have been committed in the past, the stealing of intergenerational wealth. We've had Sandtown, Winchester, your home community had some of the largest concentrated Black wealth in the country. It was the Rosewood, it was the Black Wall Street. It was that economic Black engine to the state of Maryland and to Baltimore, as a incorporation. That's where most of the concentration of Black wealth is at. And now you go to Sandtown, Winchester, and you ask what happened to it. But we know what happened to it. Blockbusting, redlining, not allowing the economics, to be passed on intergenerationally. Land ownership. Many of these properties, especially in Sandtown, Winchester, we're just coming into the age where we're starting to own the properties in Sandtown, Winchester, because for the longest you had ground rents, and the largest holder of ground rents are Jewish people. And a lot of folks that may be down in Florida or maybe somewhere else not understanding what's going on here in Baltimore, but we've had some archaic laws that came in under Lord Baltimore, the second Baron of Baltimore, Cecil, his son, and the King George had basically said that you can't own the land, but I'll rent the land to you. I'll ground rent the land to you. You can build your house, you can till your farm, grow crops, whatever have you. But the land belongs to England. And even after the American Revolutionary War, that rule kind of stayed in place. And as we started coming into this day and age, those who knew about the ground rent rules were able to buy the ground rents of many of these properties throughout Baltimore City. And folks who thought that they were buying their homes, Black people who thought they were buying their homes, didn't realize until years later, hey, I'm paying ground rent and I own my house, but I don't own the ground. And now you have laws in place where people are now buying their land, or are getting ready to get, or are able to get rid of the ground rent. But someone has benefited from that, mainly the Jewish community has benefited from the ownership of hundreds of years of this ground rent in Baltimore City. Other communities have benefited from us paying a ground rent in these communities, and they've been able to live off of the wealth of that, and be able to uplift their families and uplift their generations. So what Yolanda is really looking at is restorative justice. Like, at this point, we have to be purposeful about what we do. And in some cases, people are not going to like it because, they're going to think that Black people are stealing Baltimore City, but technically Baltimore City was stolen from Black people. So we have to be able to do things like, for instance, one of the programs that she wants to do is to have the dollar down program. So you pay $1 for your land. You get up to $200,000 from the city. The city gives you the money out of a bond. You take that $200,000 and you're able to build or rehabilitate a dilapidated property. You're able to get that home. You pay 0% interest in mortgage, 0%. Now the money, the city's gonna get their money back. But what it is, it's restorative justice, because we weren't able to obtain loans. And if we were able to obtain loans, many times we paid a higher interest rate. And we know that we couldn't get into certain neighborhoods because you had laws on the books that prevented us from buying into certain neighborhoods. So what this is restorative justice. This is allowing us to obtain those legacy residents that are in the city that their great grandparents came up here during the Great Black Migration looking for opportunities and weren't given that opportunities because of a Jim Crow Baltimore, because of a segregated Baltimore, will now be able to have that intergenerational wealth restored by making them a homeowner, giving them the opportunity to have taxation with representation. Because right now, if you're a renter, you don't have representation. Your landlord cares less about your failed schools, about public safety in your neighborhood, because he's living in Bel Air, he's living in Montgomery County, he's living in Westminster. He's living in a great community where he has control over his taxes, his property taxes, and he can dictate that he wants better schools, he wants better policing, he wants better neighborhoods. For us, for us, most of us are renters.
My only suggestion is that, related to those dollar houses, that she makes sure it's affordable housing.
Oh, of course.
Not people who are speculating coming in for investment. That could be a good opportunity for people, because affordable housing is a crisis all over the United States.
Correct.
And there's a tendency to bring people in, but these people gentrify the community. Instead of saying, hold on, we got dollar houses, but we give them the priority for those that are doing affordable housing to make sure that people stays in here. Now, talking about Sandtown, the whole model that was created in Tampa was part of the Sandtown model in Baltimore. When I was in Baltimore, I took part in what was known as the Federal Empowerment Zone. It was one of the first initiative that looked at a whole holistic approach to rebuilding neighborhood, and Sandtown was one of those communities. The problem was they created that initiative, but they created it in a way that we will continue to depend on them. What we did in Tampa was to turn it around. We kept the idea about holistic planning, but we made sure that the community was controlling. So instead of these big corporations going to talk to the banks, we actually went to the banks to talk about the necessity for CRA intent. And now this is a strategy that we're using to bring in money, as opposed to bringing in money for those that got money. This is an opportunity to reduce gentrification. And that, guess what? The banks down here, they love it. They love it because we approach them not as a nonprofit, 501c3. We approach them as a business corporation, just like any corporation. And our bottom line was to create wealth. And the banks benefited because they was getting a loan. So it was a win-win for everybody. Now, keep in mind, when the white people heard what we was doing, they said, no way that black organization is going to do that. That's not supposed to happen. We changed it all. And it is happening. As we speak today, it is happening. We're showing what can be done when the black community get together and strategically plan that pathway forward. I can't overemphasize that CRA and TIP. This is the mechanism to get the money. Because guess what? The banks are supposed to give back to the poor communities. But if the poor communities don't know how to talk to the lenders and the investors, they lose out. As a matter of fact, I want to send you some stuff that we're doing here in Tampa, and hopefully she can use that as part of her campaign. And if she does, she's going to knock everybody out of the game.
Yes, sir.
Because everybody's looking for the government to solve this problem. Everybody say the government should do it. I say no, it's the banks. This is the strategy. Get to the banks. That's where the money is in the corporation. Cut the government out because they don't have money.
Right. Well, see, what we're looking at in some cases, well, see, we say the government doesn't have any money, but yet we just gave, $700 million to Sagamore to build Port Covington, or what's now called Port Peninsula. We gave 200 some odd million to Exelon. John Pakarakis has gotten hundreds of millions of dollars in what they call payment in lieu of taxes for years. What we're looking at is it's time, and we did a losing proposition with the Hilton Hotel and the Convention Center, which technically they're billionaires. They didn't need the city's money. They could have built their own hotel down at the Convention Center. But they kind of knew the writing was on the wall in reference to hospitality and things like that. Now look what happened with COVID. The whole hospitality industry has died out. The hotels are not doing the business that they used to. They're barely paying the interest back on the bond in reference to that joint partnership with Hilton Hotel and the Convention Center partnership. They're barely paying the interest payments on that, so they haven't been able to make good on the bond. What we're proposing is different. What we're proposing is that there's been crimes committed against those in Baltimore City that technically should have inherited intergenerational wealth. A lot of these residents that are living in the housing projects, that are living in some of these segregated, communities that were segregated, that were redlined, they purposely put us in neighborhoods like Cherry Hill, Westport. These were neighborhoods that were designated off for us, for black people. They didn't bring the resources in. The schools were poor. Even after desegregation, what we're investigating is that you have a lot of white educators that stayed on, right? And Dr. Shockley has this documentary that he's done recently. It's called Culture Wars, where they talk about the educational system of black children around the country. And one thing that they identified was that white teachers, when they go into these urban environments, even after desegregation, these white teachers really are only going to preserve white power. They're not going to do anything to uplift these children in these communities. So when desegregation took place and we integrated into these majority white schools, what happened was a lot of these white children left out. You had a white flight here in Baltimore. And you also had an increase in enrollment in private schools because white folks had more income. They had homes. They could borrow on the equity of the homes and send their children to private schools where we couldn't afford private schools, right?
Exactly.
What you were left with was an educational system that didn't have many black educators, that had more majority white educators. And there's one teacher in the documentary that Dr. Shockley presents to the community. The white teacher says it. She says, white women were, we're sheltered and we're preserved. You know what I mean? We're shown white power. We're shown white privilege. We're developed and raised up under that. So when we come into a black institution, when we come into a black learning environment, and learning environment, what makes you think that we're going to do anything to really uplift or educate these black children? It's not to our benefit. It doesn't benefit us as white women. So of course you're going to teach European history. Of course you're going to teach to be dominant and respectful to white people. And that's the type of educational system that we got after desegregation. And even till now, one of the reasons why our school system is really failing here in Baltimore City is because we don't have a strong Afrocentric curriculum. We don't teach Black pride. We don't teach Black power. We don't teach how, we rule kingdoms in Kemet. That the first civilization began in Kemet. We don't talk about those things. And so, because we don't, and it's intentional, right? Because at the end of the day, I'm trying to preserve white power. I'm trying to preserve white privilege. And it is not to my benefit as a white educator to do anything to uplift Black children. I'm going to keep them always down.
You touch on it. And that's the thing that people don't understand. They keep looking at the white man to solve our problem when the white man going to maintain his own power. Unless we understand that we have to create our own power, we're going to be lost. Now, the technology center that we're doing is going to change the whole narrative, because we're going to teach little Black kids, especially poor kids, how to use artificial intelligence, ChatGPT, and Web3, and change the whole narrative. And white, wealthy communities throughout the nation, they're teaching their kids artificial intelligence, they're teaching them GPT, and they're teaching them Web3. And poor Black communities, like so often when technology comes, we left behind. So we're changing.
Or we're users. We become users. That's it. We become users, but we don't understand there's more to being on the other end. There's a back end to these things that we should be a part of. The development, the creation, the actual producing a product that becomes the front end product for people to utilize. And most of these technologies, even technologies of the past, have created some of the billionaires that you see out there now. When you had the internet boom and the whole home computer boom, there were more millionaires and billionaires generated from that in the white community because they tinkered with computers. They built computers in their garages. They started programming. They started learning programming languages and things of that nature. Matter of fact, I went to a high school that I wanted to be a part of the computer programming, but they were only reserving it for white students. Then they told me, they said, no, you Puerto Rican and black folks, y'all should get into auto mechanics, marine mechanics, carpentry. You got these shops for y'all, but computers, you don't want to touch that. You don't have the fortitude for that. And I can only imagine if I had the opportunity to touch computers back then, where I would be at now, because I'm an IT person now. I do programming and websites and things of that nature. I can only imagine where I would be now if I was able to go to a course like that in the high school level and be developed in Pascal, Cobalt. There was all these different programs that they were teaching at the time. PSL1, these were the languages that banks were using, that the first sets of computers were starting to use, machine language. I can only imagine where I would be at if I had the opportunity to go to a course like that, but they restricted us, from that. So it's important, again, with all these technologies coming on, even in reference to things like autonomy, autonomous vehicles, autonomous machinery, robotics. It's important that drones, it's important that we start getting into this technology and start utilizing this technology from the back end.
You see the point. Imagine this, kids in poor neighborhoods learning how to do robotics.
Yeah.
Imagine this, little kids know how to do game applications. Little kids know how to do mobile applications. You want to take them off the corner? Give them something to come off the corner, and technology would definitely excite them. So I'm at the Center for Nonprofit and Community Development. And what we do, in part, just like what we're doing in West Tampa, is begin to change the narrative when it comes to poor communities. Right now, we're in 15 different states preaching this idea that you have to build it from the bottom up, and you have to forget about being a nonprofit 501c3, because nonprofits are very well known for begging. You have to be a business. You have to show your value. You have to say, if you invest in us, here's the return on your investment. That's what the major players want to hear. When we meet with the banks, they love us because they're so used to people coming, all these things are going in our community and we need money for this. We don't. We say we're a business and we can make you money. Just like the white boys do. We do it. We
Right.
change the whole narrative
Right.
when it comes to that. In Baltimore, especially in Sandtown, I know there's some organization right now working in Sandtown. I think it's the Salvation Army or whatever the case might be. The only thing I can say to Sandtown, you better back up and create your own initiative. Because what happened when those organizations like Salvation Army leave, they take the wealth away.
Yeah.
But if you decide to change the narrative and create your own community development corporation, now the money comes directly to you instead of a middleman. And we have to stop this middleman attitude when it comes to our neighborhood. Everything comes to them and then it's come out to us, and we only get a small percent. We have to understand that we're just as smart as the average person, and if
Correct.
we teach us right, we definitely can take the narrative. And I think that's your attitude. Your attitude is that it's not about being black, it's about being black and empowered.
Correct.
Knowing our values. Stop
Correct.
being victim.
Correct.
Why are we victim when we're the greatest people on earth?
That's right.
And
That's
we
right.
allow ourselves to be victimized when we build, what have we not done as a black people?
Correct. Correct.
It seems like now we forgot ourselves. We forgot where we were, and now we all victims depending upon the system instead of using the system to work for us. That's why I appreciate you, man. And I know a lot of people was attacking you about that plane thing. When it comes up in the sky, right?
Yeah.
We got that here I'm similar here in Tampa. Ain't nobody complaining. You know why?
Right. Because you got mostly Republicans. You got mostly conservatives down there. You're bringing up a little.
Right. So that's what it does, man. And I understand civil rights, but I also understand human rights. The right to be able to come out in a safe neighborhood. So what do you say? The birds on you, whatever the case might be.
Right.
That's what that
turn the camera on you. We were talking about turning the camera on the system, so it held not only us accountable, but it held the system accountable, held the police accountable. We were able to vindicate 2 young men that were wrongfully accused by the police. One of them was accused by the Gun Trace Task Force, and actually ended up getting a settlement. Ivan Bates actually represented him as a defense attorney. So Ivan had the opportunity to know that the program works, not only to hold us accountable, but to also vindicate the innocent. And my whole thing with the whole aerial surveillance program that I kept trying to tell folks is, for me, I was a part of it because everybody was afraid that there was going to be an invisible hand behind the operation of it. So my thing was that I managed to kind of get my way into the program to be that eye. And I told Dr. McNutt, I got this Louisville Slugger in my car that I bring every day, to this command center that he had built. And it's right in my car. And if I think for 1 minute that you're doing something that's to the detriment, of our community, I'm going to go get that back. And I'm going to tear everything up inside this place. I'm going to break every computer, every server, every piece of equipment. Then I might even fly your head in the process. But the more and more I got into the program, and the more and more they know the program, like I had the opportunity to look at the code that actually ran the software, that actually did the cameras, put all the imagery together. And I went through all the code, and I sat up there one night because I had access to it, and I went there, all night long and looking at this code that had really been built over for 14 years. So they put like 14 years worth of, coding into this. And it was sloppy, but I didn't see anything in there that was doing anything that was harmful, like storing something somewhere separate in a separate database. Everything was straight up and up. So for me, it was important that what I observed, to kind of bring that back to the community and tell the community, okay, well, I don't see anything yet. I'm going to keep you updated. But if you're afraid of an invisible hand, so far, I don't see an invisible hand. What I see is a man who's passionate and trying to curb violence, who's trying to save lives, who's trying to do something different in our community so that we can start the healing process.
And you know what? The reality is that they spying on us already. The CIA, the police department, and
Correct.
so many other people are spying on us.
Right.
Now, normally under normal circumstances, I will question any type of surveillance. We
Correct.
don't have that luxury though. People are
Correct.
dying
Correct.
every day. The city is in a crisis. You know, so we don't have the luxury of being civil rights advocates.
Yeah.
When
Yeah.
families are dying,
Yeah.
it takes priority over everything. And the average person is in the streets that's dying. You know what they say? Bring the plane back. If that's
Yeah.
with my son or my
Yeah.
daughter,
Yeah.
you know, bring it back. Because the reality is, folks, they spying on us anyway.
Yeah.
That's
One of the
we've been spied on.
one of the other things that we wanted to do, and now we see the impact of it, was that, you know, we were looking at the carjackings at the time. So we were only allowed to look at like 4 different cases: homicides, shootings, armed robberies, and armed carjackings. But we see it now that poor Black people are being hurt right now because of high rising insurance rates, because they're carjacking and they're robbing these cars and stealing these cars, especially Hyundais and Kias. There's some folks that can't even get insurance anymore on a Hyundai or Kia because they're considered to be high-risk vehicles. They're targeted vehicles. That's something that we could have adjusted and been able to help curb. You know, if you can recover your car back, you know, fast, and your car doesn't disappear. I think the last estimate I heard, like less than 30% or around 30% of the cars are being recovered. What's happening to the other, you know, 70% of the cars? You know, are they being chopped up, you know, put in containers, you know, and shipped off to another country
I think they
somewhere?
are. I think that's the deal. People don't understand this thing is bigger than stealing cars.
Correct.
This thing is about the mafia and those other people. Because for
Correct.
every car that person steals, he might get couple $100, and guess what? Now it's going to another country and they selling that car for tens of thousands of dollars. So
Correct.
you're right. Then people don't understand the big picture when
Correct.
it comes to that. And I'm glad you brought that out. You're saying you only recover a percent. Then what about the other percent?
Correct.
And a lot of us are not critical thinking. We don't go beyond what's in front of us. And we don't ask the questions necessary to solve the problem. So you're right. That's a big fact because you're right down there in the harbor where the ships.
Correct. Correct.
Down there,
Correct. They used to find stolen cars. Matter of fact, there was an African ring that was going on for a while. Of course, until they started cracking open these containers going to certain countries, they were finding, you know, Mercedes and all kinds of stolen luxury cars here. You know, this is like back, I'd say, the late 80s, maybe even the early 90s. They were finding them piled up inside container ships being shipped, you know, to Africa. Of course, they busted that ring, but who's to say, you know, they haven't found a new way of doing it? You know, I know that some of the cars that they're recovering, the catalytic converters, the airbags are missing. In some cases, the seats and the rims are missing. So someone is selling that stuff back in the market. You know. So
Just let me know you're done.
You hit it on the nail, man. When it comes to that conversation, but my concern is that, and I can't overemphasize, Black people, we have to stop being victims. You know, we have the intellect to change this whole narrative. Something happened that took our spirit away. And now we become dependent, and we think we can't do it without the white man, understanding that it's because of what we did that the white man can do what he did.
yeah.
You know, it's like we lost this sense of who we are in this country right here, and we have marginalized ourselves. When they say marginalized community, it's marginalized because we live by that. They told us that, and we live accordingly. It's like the self-fulfilling prophecy. If you believe it, it will happen.
Correct. Well, I appreciate what you're doing down there, and I definitely would like to get, you know, more information and see if there's some synergy.
Some information, man.
Appreciate
Definitely,
you.
that's going to change the whole narrative because you're going to be talking like nobody else in Baltimore is talking, and importantly, you're going to excite the people that's in the streets to vote. Because the people in the streets who are having a hard time, you know what they want to know? What you going to do for me?
Correct.
We hear about what you're going to do for everybody else, but how are you going to empower us? When you start telling the people, hey, we plan to bring in money to create wealth. We want individuals to start their own business.
Correct.
And we want the banks to understand they got to pay for it.
Correct.
Now, the government should pay for it too, but the banks got literally trillions of dollars. You see what I'm saying? Trillions. And they're still making money on us. I tell you what, when I left those bankers in Tampa, they appreciate us. Because now they see us as a partner instead of a person coming to be as a victim. And we're telling them, we can return that investment. If you invest $100,000 in us, we return that $250,000. We know how to make money, and we know how to flip it. And we don't need nobody else to come in to do what we need to do. And that's what you call an empowered community, when you step up to the plate as a partner, not as a person who's merely participating. That's changed the whole narrative.
Yeah. I was telling folks that I've been watching this documentary called High on the Hog, right? Where it talks about the connection of... it's on Netflix.
Oh, okay.
And it's a documentary that talks about how, soul food, black cuisine, all of it has a connection back to Africa, right? And of course they did. They're going to every different city, New York, Chicago. And one of the episodes I watched, they were talking about New Orleans. And again, talking about these crimes that have been committed on our people. Most folks came out of enslavement into sharecropping in Louisiana. And they came up with a system that was supposed to be fair, but wasn't fair. So they said, look, you cultivate your land. Half of it goes to the landowner. The other half you can sell, on the market. But if you didn't have a mule or a plow or any equipment, you had to rent that equipment from the landowner, from the white man, from the plantation owner. So now you got to pay him. So now you at less than half. You're at a third now, because you got to pay him for the mule and the plow and cultivating of the land, right? So then, when the cotton gin finally came out, and the machinery, to cultivate cotton, with a tractor or a machine, of course, the plantation owners came to those who were in servitude and said, you got to be out by Wednesday. Thank you for your service. Take your stuff, take your family. You got to be out by Wednesday. And kicked literally tens of thousands of black folks that were in servitude at the time, or sharecropping at the time, basically kicked them off of the land, right? And so there's one guy who is part of that culture. He came from that sharecropping era, right? He tells the story of how most folks ended up in the South. In the cities. So that's how we ended up in New Orleans. And what the city did in New Orleans was said, okay, well, we're going to build these housing projects because these black folks have nowhere to go. They have no money, no income. So they shuttled them and they pushed them into these communities that didn't have any resources, that were poorly built. And that's where they lived at for, we're talking about the coming out of post-war Reconstruction. We're talking about coming into the early 1900s. So from 1900 all the way up, that's where we lived at in New Orleans. And these slum communities, they built the ghettos. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because almost everywhere that we've gone, my show today is kind of like really asking, what can we hold on to when we know that everything that we have gotten in some cases has been given, although we've built. Don't get me wrong, because the guy said, don't look at the plantations negatively. The plantation was built by black hands, by Africans. America's wealth. Right. Even the workhouses. Even the White House, the Master's house. Right. So the plantation, the invention of the plantation was us. We invented that. the cultivating of that land. That was us. Because the white man didn't have no idea what to do with that land. We were the ones that understood about cultivation because we were already doing it in Africa. We were already cultivating the land. Take care of the village. So he says, don't look at those things as negative because we've helped build this country. We helped build that foundation. We helped build these principles. That's our land. But what can we do now? And again, your idea is great, what you're doing down there in Tampa. But what more can we do to make sure that we don't continue to lose? Because it seems like every time we get headway, something gets taken from us. Like, how do we hold on to the little that we can hold on to in Black America? When we see, like, for instance, our schools are failing, our communities are failing, our economics are failing. And in some cases, it makes it easier for us to be picked off. We know about the school to prison pipeline. So when our children aren't educated, we're destined to head down that road of imprisonment and back into servitude. When we don't have the economics, of course, we can't preserve our neighborhoods. And they were saying that the worst attack on the Black community is gentrification, because not only is it the stealing of the land or taking of the land and displacing people. Not only is it just about that, but the culture and the history. I told you about the plantation. There was a culture, there was a history that was built there by African people, by African Black American people. So gentrification is not only the taking of the land and displaced people, but it is also about the destruction of culture and history of Black people. So how can we minimize this? Because again, there's a social influencer that I talk about all the time, and I'm hoping to try to get him on this program, where he talks about in 5 years, if we really don't start moving forward politically, collectively, as a Black race together, that within 5 years we are going to be politically extinct.
Oh, that's only part of it. If we don't do what we need to do by the year 2034, as a whole, Black people are going to be considered a second-class economic group of people. That's how serious it is. That's why we can't sit back and wait for what's going to happen, because we see the writing on the wall. We have to do what we can, Black man, Black woman, to change the narrative. Now, the concept of racism came out of Portuguese.
Of course.
This guy right here, the king, ordered this guy to write a book. And this book was to say, hey, y'all, it's okay to, have slaves, Black slaves, because they're ignorant, they're unbeasy and everything like that. As a result of that, even today, the whole world see us as a second-class people. And guess what? They're so good, we even see ourselves as a second-class people. And it all started back in Portuguese in 1400 for the purpose of legalizing slavery, and that's what we have today. And and I hope this goes out to especially those young people that's on the corner. See, they set you up to love the hood. The hood was created by them.
Correct.
See, we used to have a neighborhood, and then we had a community.
Right.
The strategy to Black people down is destroy the community, destroy the neighborhood, and leave them with the hood. And that's what we have now. It's the hood. We don't even understand that this was created by someone else.
That's profound, my brother. That's really profound.
But it's a reality check. And when y'all start saying, hold on, I'm being played? You mean all this stuff I'm talking about gangster and killing? They put this in my man and it was all set up. Yeah, it was, my friend. You embrace it, the hood. We need to change the hood to the neighborhood to the community, and the community to the village. That's how we change the narrative and keep it for ourselves, really.
Wow. I appreciate you. That was again deep, to break it down like that. And you're right. This whole race thing is contrived. We've had Dr. Jane Elliott, probably one of the whitest ladies in America, you know, who did the brown eye, blue eye exercise. She wrote a book on it. Where when Dr. King had passed away, she had separated her white students by brown eyes and blue eyes. And she discriminated against the blue-eyed children and gave all the privileges to the brown-eyed children to try to get them to understand what discrimination and what racism was all about. And we had her on our program, on our radio show, and she talks about how there is no such thing as race or color. There's only one race.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the mitochondrial DNA connects us all back to Africa.
I saw that. Yeah, I remember that. Right, you're right.
And even when I talk about Pangea, Pangea is when all the land masses, when the sea plates, the sea floor, were all kind of connected together. And Africa was in the center. And of course, you know, Central America and Latin America, North America separated, went that way, and Australia went one way, and you know, Europe went up one way. You know, the tectonic plates shifted over 200 millions of years, and they're expecting, you know, 200 years from now, you know, all these land masses are going to be totally different than what they are now, right? Because the floor constantly shifts, constantly moves. So there's really no such thing as separated races, because we all really came out of the center, which was Africa, although it may have separated, you know.
You don't want that information to get out.
Yeah.
When you start talking about it all started with us, no, because that goes against their superiority complex that they are all about it.
Right.
When you get a chance, man, Jason, I suggest you read this book. It's called The Color of Race.
Okay.
And that begins to define how we created what's known as the redlining and black communities throughout the nation. How we had healthy communities, and what they did with redlining, they cut off access to capital. They put in a worst environmental plans that they could to devalue the community. They created it, and that's why we call it the hood. Redlining created the hood. And when people study the history, they understand, oh, I see how this all started. Because a lot of people, contrary to population, they think they created poor neighborhoods by being poor. But you didn't. That was a rich neighborhood, and they pulled all the resources out, and they made you poor. And now you think it's poor because of you, because it's concept. If black people move over to where we are, they're going to destroy the neighborhood.
If is it called The Color of Race in America?
Yes, it's Color of Race.
I was saying, it's the book called The Color of Race in America? Is that the whole name of the book?
It might be.
I'm about to display it right now. You tell me if this is the book or not.
I want to send you the video. You're gonna be knocked off by the.
Is this the book you're talking about?
Not it.
Okay.
No, not that one.
Okay.
Okay. Because this goes beyond 1940. This goes like where we are present day now. But I'm gonna send you the video. I'm saying The Color of Race, but it might be The Color of something else. But I'm going to send that to you. That explains it all. That's what got me to understand. Oh. So we didn't create the hood. The hood was created for us.
Yeah.
And they gave dates. They showed how the federal government played a part in it. They showed how the banks played a part in it, and everything like that. But I'm gonna send you.
Well, I just told you about New Orleans, and again how a lot of the folks that were kicked off the land as sharecroppers in New Orleans. They all basically, some of them went up north. It was right around the time of the Great Black Migration of the 1900s. A lot of folks headed up north, but a lot of folks headed to the city in New Orleans. And when the government there in New Orleans saw all these folks, you know, coming in from the bayous and, you know, coming in from all the different areas, Baton Rouge and all the different areas that were cotton, you know, land, you know, cotton land, cotton farms, cotton plantations, they needed to do something with all of these black folks. So they ended up taking land that basically hadn't been developed yet, and they built these housing projects. They built these housing developments. And of course, some of these developments have evolved throughout the years. You know, they started off as shanties and bungalows and, you know, and those type of units to eventually the concrete and the brick units that you would see, the community like Little Wayne comes from, the housing developments, the actual federal housing projects. It was still contrived and it was still developed by the government that really placed us in these communities that had lack of resources, lack of good schools, lack of public safety, they purposely put us in these communities and created the ghettos,
Yeah.
and in this document.
That's what the young people have to understand, man, because they think we created this.
Yeah.
And that means they got this low self-image of themselves. Well, black people destroy things.
Yeah.
It's indicative of these vacant houses. It's indicative of all these negative things. They think they actually did that, and they believe that, and that's what's
Right.
changing them in the way they are today. When they learn history, they say, "No, we didn't." And let me tell you, the worst thing you can do if you're on the corner right now, if you listen to this right now, the worst thing you can do is change the narrative. Flip that switch and show that now we're smart and we can do it differently. If you want to hurt that white man, flip the switch and start, changing the narrative, because the wealth that's in our community, for the most part, we got $1.5 trillion that comes in as a black people. What? The third richest nation in the world. And what do? We become consumers. What happened if we flip that switch? And now instead of consumers, we become investors. That's why I got a beef with these rappers that's got all this money.
Yeah.
And they come in with like youth programs. I say, no, do like some of the rappers do, build affordable housing.
Correct. Correct. I saw T.I. in Atlanta just finished building an affordable housing unit. That's
what I'm talking
right,
about.
right. Those are the things that we should be doing, because again, that also, strengthens keeps us from, again, that gentrification that's encroaching on all sides of us. Prime example here in Baltimore, they just did a study recently, found that they developed like less than 14 new affordable housing units came online within a decade. And the need is so great. And then now you want to try to move rapidly forward, to build affordable housing, but the need has been there, you're kind of Susie come lately, and taking care of the community, and when you talk about something that's interesting though, because I talk about the music and I had a conversation with a young man here whose son was on the box, was on the GPS box. They came to do a home check and found that the GPS box was taken off and was wrapped around the dog.
I tell you, black people are something else, man.
And so the young man is out in the streets. Now he's wanted for a possible shooting and armed robbery with a ghost gun. They caught his friend, but they didn't catch him yet. And I was asking my homeboy, whose son it is, I was like, what can we do to help these young people, especially when, again, here's, the conversation that I'm having as to what can we hold on to in Black America when you look at the attack and the fix is in, right? So I explained it to him and I broke it down to him. I said, how do you help young people in this day and era, this day and age, when you have rap music, whether it's a female rapper or a man rapper, they're, perpetuating, the stereotypes. If it's Sexy Red or Ice Spice, or Megan Thee Stallion, they're all, Cardi B, stick it in my, put it in my mouth, treat me like a thought, it's all provocative, sexually, hypersexually driven, when you look at drill music, drill music is all about, I'm gonna come by and see your homeboy, you don't want none, I'm gonna shoot you up, I'm gonna kill you up, I'm gonna shoot you with my gun, I got my gat, everything is about, murder, kill, shooting, you don't want none, I'm coming for you. It's all violent driven. So it's like I told him, I said, how do you get a hold of your child when everything around him, and even with the music, like the music is even driven. I told him one of the number one songs right now playing on the radio is a song called Waukesha. And Waukesha is about drinking lean. That he has the rapper is talking about he has a love affair with Waukesha. Waukesha is a metaphor for lean, for a cocktail mix of lean and a soda mixed together with liquid codeine. And he has this love with Waukesha. And he's telling all the different ways he takes Waukesha, and sometimes he smokes a little weed, sometimes he pops a little pills, but he's still in love with Waukesha. And that's like the number one song. Every song is pop a pill, drink some lean. Everything is these, pushing the narrative that we should be a drugged out culture. It's like, how do we counter that? You're trying to raise your son, but your son has a counterculture that's going against, what you're trying to teach him and instill in him.
Exactly.
And then now, go ahead.
Ice Cube made it clear, and people don't want to listen to that man. That man saying that rap music is controlled by private prisons. The idea is that in order for us to keep these prisons open, we have to feed to black kids the notion that the best way to make it out the hood is through drugs and killing. And when Ice Cube came up with this, they're trying to blacklist him. But the bottom of it is, our culture has been stolen. It's been stolen. They will not let positive rap get out on a large scale. Most of the rap that's coming out is geared towards making sure you go to prison. This is big prison. This is big business. And that's what brother Ice Cube was trying to say. That the rap songs and the prisons are all connected together because the private prison control that. I always say to black people, and I hope that the black rappers hear this, why don't we open our own prisons up? So we can rehabilitate people when they come out. Because the way it is now with private prisons, brother right there, he told the truth, man, right? And he was straight up about it. He's getting hell because of it, but it's the truth. And even to the day, man, when you're trying to understand why are these communities so violent, because we feed it into their heads.
Right.
Big corporations like the prison industry need us to be in prison. They make money off of it. And we go to prison, they just give us 3 meals and that's it. If black people start to build our own private prisons, then we could create an opportunity where people come in, and when they go out, they come out with a positive attitude and the skills that they need. So to the black rappers, and I hope you listen to me, stop building affordable housing. Start creating opportunity where poor people can start their own business. And by far, create and build our own private prisons so we can save ourselves and stop waiting for somebody else to save us because ain't nobody coming. The saying in Baltimore is, we all we got, we all we need. Now, I use that term all the time when I'm talking to people around the country, is that as a black people, we all we got and that's all we need because ain't nobody coming for us. And if you think I'm joking, look at what happened in New Orleans when the storm came. People was on the roofs waiting for somebody to come. Nobody came.
Yeah. So it says, I don't know the names, Bill. He was on Bill Maher's program. He's saying, but if you follow the money and you go high enough, you start to see. He said, okay, let's say, let's take rap music. The same people who own labels own the prisons. Ice Cube said, right, because if they own stock in the labels, they also have stock in the, Prison Corporation of America and things like that. Ice Cube said, adding ladder, that there are a lot of dots to connect, but he was simply giving a broad example of how people at the top can manipulate what's going on with the people who are bickering and fighting. And that's us, bickering and fighting. You know, and it's interesting. You know, they a good friend of mine, and I know you know who this person is, Professor Griff. You know, we talk all the time by text message. You know, all the time about certain situations. You know, that's going on in our community. And they talk about him, and people like David Banner talk about the frequencies of drill music. You know, that the energy is so negative. You know, that the constant gyrating, you know, the constant vibrating, the pulsing of drill music, which is at 120 beats per minute. You know, people don't realize that there has been science and studies into audio waves and waves, frequencies, and things like that. And that frequencies and audio waves and things like that can be used for mind control, can be used to weaponize humans. Right, right.
Added to that, subliminal messages that they have in the rap. You know, you can't see it, but it's flashing: kill, 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 jail, jail, jail. It's these subliminal messages that they putting in these rap songs that lead to that. And the Germans are good at it, because the Germans learned how to do psychology to control the mind. So that's good.
Here's even a deeper one, right? They talk about, because him and David Banner and them, you know, have these podcasts, and they talk about, you know, the music industry. And I think it was on David Banner's. No, I think it was on Professor Griff's podcast. He was talking about a friend of his was on as a guest, and he was talking about, you hear this mumble rap. You know, everybody kept you know, talking about this mumble rap that you can't understand what half of these rappers were saying in reference to mumble rap. And he was saying, although those who don't understand the rap call it mumble rap, it actually is a rap that has definition to it. You just don't hear it. So he said what happened was, one day he was at a homeboy's house and they started drinking Hennessy, and he put on, you know, the radio station, and they were playing that mumble rap. And at first, before the buzz kicked in, it sounded like garbage, sounded like mumble rap. But once he started kind of getting a little high from the alcohol, it became clear to him. Every word that the mumble rap was saying, the rapper was saying, he could hear every word clearly of what he was saying. Because what he realized was that they're going into the studios high on lean, high on weed, high on alcohol, and they're spitting out words that you have to be in that same mindset. You have to tune yourself into that same frequency in order for you to understand what it is that they're saying. So what happens is, we don't understand it, but that young, you know, cat out there, that young cat out there in the street who's smoking that, you know, that loud, who's, you know, sipping back on some Patron, popping an E-pill, and his mind is in a whole different stratosphere, listens to that and hears every word and interprets every word. And it's almost like an encoded message that you have to be in the right mindset in order to decode it. You know, and when he said that, it was like, wow, it was like, that's some deep, you know, some deep stuff, but it shows you the ability of mind control. You know, the Germans practiced a lot of that stuff with eugenics. A lot of people don't realize, you know, they gave their soldiers LSD, you know, to pump them up, you know, to get them hyped up to go to war. You know, and part of eugenics, they found that you can do it chemically. You know, you could do it in different ways. You could do it through subliminal messages. You know, there's so many different ways that you can kind of alter the mind or change the state of the mind, you know, by doing certain things, whether it's sight, whether it's hearing, you know, whether it's ingesting something into the system. You know, there's different ways that you can mind control, you know, and this is just another form of mind control. You know,
are you familiar with this guy? I think it's a German scientist called Pell.
I think I've heard that name before.
Yeah, and here's what he did. He showed that you can condition people. What he did was to do the experiment with dogs. And what he did was that every time he wanted the dog to do something, he gave him something in terms of benefit.
Oh,
and they
okay.
became
Okay.
used to it. The same thing is used with the rap music. You know, the same approach. We need to pay attention to psychology, because psychology is why we are where we are today.
Correct.
They ain't controlling our mind physically and mentally, and
Correct.
that we have to change the narrative. When I was in Sandtown, and I took part of the empowerment zone and community building partnership before that with the Rouse Foundation, they brought in people from around the country to teach us in terms of how to empower communities. They had people from Harvard, from Yale, from Princeton, from University of Baltimore, University of Maryland. And they told me way back then, they say, Mike, you're different because you ask questions that nobody in this room is asking. And once you get this information, you're going to change the whole narrative because you got the particulars as to how to change this narrative. So I definitely thank Sandtown for getting that type of knowledge to understand how these people think. And then they use that. See, I was supposed to go to corporate America. I was supposed to get a job with corporate America, make a lot of money, and rob a lot of people. Because that's what corporate America do. But what I decided to, now I'm going back to the streets.
Right.
Everything I know and everything I will learn will be to preserve the inner city, because that's where I come from. That's where my family is from.
Right.
That's where my parents are from, to change the narrative in that particular respect. And I can tell you right now, they probably say the worst thing we could have done was to educate that black man.
Yeah.
And let him go back to his people instead of coming with us.
Yeah.
But that goes to show, man, we have to start thinking for ourselves, man, in terms of how we change this narrative. We know it can be done.
Right.
We've gone through the worst of the worst. We
Right.
did Black Wall Street, we did all this stuff. Every time they tear us down, we come back and we rebuild.
That's right. That's right. We're resilient. Yeah, we're resilient people. Yeah, we're resilient people. You know, we've been through so much. You know, and you could try to tear us down. You know, but the greatest form, and somebody said this too recently, the greatest form of resistance is to wake up every day.
Yeah.
Because they don't expect us to wake up. You know what I mean? They don't expect us to wake up. They don't expect us to get up. You know, so the greatest resistance that we can do to white America is to get up every day, put our feet down on that ground, and decide to make a change for ourselves, for our family, and for our community. You know, for our hood.
Are you familiar with Willie Leach?
Of course, of course, of course.
Okay. Even to the day, what that man did is causing us problems.
Yeah.
He took the lights against the lights and turned us against each other.
Yeah.
The house nigga against the field nigga, and that mentality. They say it was only going to last for 200 years. 400 years later, what he did back then is still turning us apart as a people.
Yes.
He showed how to turn them against each other. You can't beat them. You can't destroy them.
That's right.
But if you turn them against each other, they will self-implode.
Yeah, yeah.
Even to the day that's going on now.
Well, my timer is showing me that I got like less than 3 minutes left of the program.
I appreciate you, my brother.
No, I appreciate you, Mr. Randolph, correct? Mr. Randolph, correct?
Mr. Randolph,
Mr.
right.
Randolph. So,
Next week, we come back and talk some more about
yes, sir. Yes, sir.
The color of I think it's a color of money, maybe not, but I'll send it to you. Then you can talk about that and give people some real information about how we get out this narrative. So, man, thank you.
And I gotta thank you, my brother, for bringing. Right, I gotta thank you, my brother, for bringing the sunshine all the way up from Tampa, Florida, on this rainy day here in Baltimore. All right, peace to you, my brother. Wow. I mean, like, we got to come together and have these conversations. And I want folks to come on. Let's dialogue. Let's talk about our community. He's solution-minded. And he has some solutions that he's willing to share with us, being a native of Sandtown, Winchester. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what he's laid out, what he's doing down there in Tampa. And if there's any way that we can help from up here as well, to build some of that synergy as Black people, to bond together, to strengthen each other, even if we are several hundred miles away from each other, we should still be able to nation build within this country. So I told y'all before I leave, I was going to leave y'all with a spiritual